Hi everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio TV. This is your host James, and super excited. I'm in the company of two awesome people today. I've got my co-host Hillary Raimo with me. Hi Hillary, great to see you again.
Hi James, hi everybody, good to see you again.
We're going to be talking to Lorraine Roe, an author and psychic. I think it's best you introduce Hillary today, introduce Lorraine today, Hillary.
Yeah, Lorraine Roe, I met her several years ago when I was doing a show on Achieve, and her energy just captivated me. So I needed to talk to her. I needed to interact with her. We had a great show together. She has a really interesting story that I'm excited to share with everybody today. She is a former investigative TV journalist. She won 4 Emmys for her work. She became psychic overnight, she claims, and she left that world to go into the world of being psychic and all that means. She's the founder of Psychic Housewives, which we're going to talk about today. She has a new book coming out, The Psychic Survival Manual. I'm really, really happy and excited to talk to her because she gives such a unique edge to the phenomenon of being psychic. She has a great way of describing it. She has a very down-to-earth, grounded, multi-dimensional perspective on being psychic, and I just love her energy, and I'm so excited she's here. So thanks, Lorraine, for joining us. Thanks for being here. How are you? Where have you been around the world? I can't wait to find out all of this. But before we go into all that, why don't you give our viewers a little bit of a background of stuff that you've been doing, that you've done, that I didn't touch on.
Okay, well, great to see you, Miss Hillary. I love you. I adore you. Well, I began as a mild-mannered reporter, and I spent 15 years in broadcast, and it was really great. It was great. It was a great experience. And the last years of that, I was an investigative reporter, and as you say, I was fortunate enough to win some Emmy Awards for my reporting. And then I got into transcendental meditation. I got into some yoga, and I started to learn to relax a little bit more, and slowly but surely, some psychic events started happening. And my whole experience with being a reporter in my own life was I would have psychic knowings. And psychic is really defined as knowing the unknowable, something that you can't maybe feel, taste, or touch, but you know it. And I would have those experiences, but I would never call them psychic. I would call them crazy coincidences. I believed in a higher power, but as I slowed down, I began to open up, and I helped some psychics do a video, Echo and Michael Bodine of Minnesota, and I've come to believe that if you hang out with other psychic people, you start to empower your gifts. And right after that, I was minding my own business at my house, in my living room, at my desk. It was my office, and a dead grandma showed up to me. And she very rapidly showed me images of a boy. And I came to believe that was a boy that was a doctor friend of mine who was married to a very good friend of mine. And she gave me very specific images, including a boy with a striped shirt holding a bucket of peaches. And when I finally was able to confirm the images with him, my whole life changed. It just changed my life. And I became psychic, and I was a reluctant psychic. Okay, I wasn't like, woo, I mean, I was scared and I was intimidated. And my work now is really to find people, to help people find support for being psychic, because I've come to believe that it is actually normal. It's very normal, and society says it isn't. But I think we all know in our heart of hearts that it is actually quite natural to have psychic experiences.
Do you feel that people are born with this ingrained system built in, so to speak, that they develop over their lifetimes, or they don't?
The system? You mean the system of being psychic?
The psychic system. Like psychic is a muscle that we have to practice using. We don't.
I think we come here with it, and I think as a child I can look back and remember specific psychic experiences I had that I would say were suppressed or put down by the adults in my life, and that caused me, I think, to turn away from it. So when I say I woke up psychic, I don't know if I tell you that I had no psychic experiences. For me personally, I think I had them, but then they got suppressed. And so, yes, do I believe we all naturally, inherently have these gifts? Absolutely. And I think that the children we have now are much more inclined towards it because it's much more acceptable to a lot of their parents.
Yeah, I think you've had a lot to do with that with your work. Believe it or not, I think your work has brought that to people, and they have better understood that. When you were in the media world, when you were doing your investigative TV journalism, was it the psychic part of you that you were connecting to do your work, to dig into those different situations? Is that what you were really doing? I mean, I think we've talked about this before. You've mentioned it being kind of like an intuitive, investigative journalism, but do you feel like you're psychic? Yeah.
Yes. I would really annoy people in Minneapolis because everybody in news works hard. They work nonstop, really hard. You go into the newsroom and you just work, and then you leave. And I would sit at my desk for a couple of hours and make some calls, try to make some connections, and I'd have a deadline that night. And I would wait, and they'll go, okay, it's time to go. And I would just rapidly gather everything, and it would have this synchronicity to it. And at one time, I think I talk about this in my first book, The Psychic Housewife's Handbook, but I called this man to ask him about some legislation, and he goes, I am writing that right now. And then we got there to do the interview, and he said, I just find that remarkable that you called me then. And my photographer said, yes, in the newsroom we call her a witch. And, he was being funny, but in fact, that's the magic that can happen when you follow your instincts. And so, yes, absolutely, that was played into my role as a reporter. And I imagine it does for a lot of reporters. They just don't call it that.
Wow.
Yeah, I was curious, just to give a little bit of background, and James and I were talking about your work before the show, and we were sharing some thoughts, just momentarily about the phenomenon of being psychic. And do you think that it's different for men and women? Do you think that men and women are wired differently? Do you think that being psychic happens to more women than men? What's your take on the gender aspect?
Well, I think it's a very different thing. I know a couple of psychics, male psychics, who are very phenomenally psychic. Like it's almost earth-shattering how psychic they are. But yet, I think to stay in balance and stay in their body with it, it's a lot of work. I tend to think that some of our intuition comes from our feminine aspects. So I think women naturally come to it with more feminine aspects than men. And so I think that's why we see the plethora of women who are really pursuing their psychic abilities, where we see probably a lesser percentage of men pursuing it, even though I think we're all inherently capable of it. So, in my personal knowledge of psychic men, although I tend to deal more with psychic women, given that, I started an organization called Psychic Housewives, but I know male psychics, and they're very, very gifted, but I don't see men going for it the same way I see women trying to actively develop it. And I know, I can only speak to certain aspects. Like, I know my husband, for instance, has very intuitive feelings and believes in spirit guides, but really the way he gets in touch with his information is he rides his Harley. I mean, he is a real big, he changes up motorcycles a lot, and he'll get his ideas and his feelings and whatever by doing something like that. And I have a motorcycle as well, and I love it, but my intuition comes to me more in the middle of my daily activities or my meditation.
Yeah, would you say that's a space that gets developed? I mean, for me, I've started doing artwork within the last couple of years, and for me, getting into my art space is that psychic space. It's very similar, and I have all these things come in. So I'm curious if that's what you're referring to. It's like we all have our own space that we connect to. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely. I think the artwork is incredibly powerful, and I really believe it's underaddressed in the psychic realm, because I think people really heavily channel into their art and their writing, and it's talked about in I'm drawing a blank on the book, but the woman who has you do the daily writing every day, and the work of really making it a discipline to channel the creativity. And then it is a co-creative process, because it's not just, oh, I just channeled straight from spirit. No, you're co-creating with your own entity, your own soul. And so when I talk to people about self-care, which goes, like, a lot of women in particular throw self-care under the bus, and I don't know, I guess we're hardwired to do that. But when I talk about self-care, I ask, what are you doing to take care of your physical body? What are you doing to take care of your creativity? What are you doing to take care of your imagination? Because when you see little kids are in the moment. They are in their imagination.
I think, guys, it's a left brain, right brain thing in part anyway. I think we're in a left brain society, and it's a right brain ability, and I think that we're equally right brained, left brain people in this world, but we're subjected or imposed into this left brain dominated society, and logical, technical, industrial, and even in that, and men and women having those abilities. Again, that comes down to a left brain. Most men are left brained and most women are right brained. However, what makes a baby, whether it's male or female, whatever, regardless of sex, what makes that baby right brained or left brained is the level of testosterone that's injected into the egg to make the zygote. That's known. So I think that's a lot to do with it. I really do. And my father's a right. He's left-handed, so he's right-brained, and he's right. A very gifted man. He's extremely intuitive. He'd know things instantly, and he's got an instinct second to none. And he's into mind and mentalism, and I just think that's a big part of it. Don't think it's the only thing. I'm just curious, Lorraine, what spectrum of abilities do you have for the psychic? Is it specific stuff, or is it everything, like clairaudience, clairvoyant, seeing spirits?
It shapeshifts for me. When I first started, it was heavily mediumship. It was heavily dead people. Now it's more seeing someone. I still do work with deceased, but I also see people's psychological backgrounds in a way. I'll see their matrix, so I'll see something that's affecting how they are in the world. And one of my prayers when I do a reading, my prayer is to align their ego with their soul. So a lot of times it will be a reading and they'll say, I knew that, I thought about that, oh yeah. I can take, but I'm not reading their mind, I'm reading their matrix. And that is, so I would say in a lot of ways I'm a counselor. I also help people. I'm really good about seeing addictions in people because I've been sober for 26 years. I don't drink or take drugs, and I do, however, smoke cigars and drink coffee, but don't tell anyone. But I can see how addiction can play in, and as you know, speaking of left brain and right brain, I feel like that's the unseen, untalked about element in our society as well, is our addiction to distraction, and that can really interrupt our connection with spirit if we let it. And so that's another part I play in working with people.
And how do you advise people to work with distraction? What's your advice to people who struggle with that?
Well, I think you have to choose your spot, because I think we need distractions. I don't think we can be on the self-help path 24 hours a day. I talked to you earlier about being a run and gun psychic. It's like, choose your spots, get quiet and find, be still and know that I am God. It's find your stillness, do your self-observation, so that maybe if you see a place you need healing, do it. So I advise people, my take on it is, take at least 15 minutes in the morning to pray and meditate and ask a few key questions. And I also think being mentored or being with other people is very powerful. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that you don't have to go live in a cave on a mountain to do this work. I don't think we're meant to be doing that at this time. I think we're meant to be out in the world as best we can and interacting belly to belly with people, and as well as online, because I think online does build communities, but I think ultimately that in-person aspect is so powerful.
Maybe you could just talk about the world you left behind. I actually had Echo Bodine on the show before, a long time ago now. I remember I had Patty McLean on, and I remember her talking about the same thing, that she went into this very reluctantly. I mean, people were just asking her to do readings and stuff, and she just didn't want to know. She didn't want to know about this ability. And I find a lot of psychics say that because they're maybe they're subjected to this world and they're not supposed to be this way, but you know. Tell us about the world you left behind, because it was very, very different to where you are now. And how reluctant was that? I mean, did that drag on for a while?
Well, the world I left behind was, I mean, it was harsh. It's harsh. I've seen so many things. It's like I was in the military, I guess. I've seen dead bodies. I've interviewed people who their daughter was missing, and the next day that young lady was found dead, and I was there when they pulled out the body. You know, I've also seen miraculous stories that are life-changing for people with legislation, and I can think of some things like home health care. We did a story that was very powerful in terms of changing home health care legislation and making regulations tighter so people could be safe. I did a story in Guatemala that, you know, about baby abductions, and actually, unbelievably, the authorities there were stealing babies from pregnant women, declaring them unfit, taking the babies out of their stomach, and then having them up for adoption in America.
Wow.
So that's the kind of stuff that was, you know, it's probably some pretty sick human aspects. And yet, the job itself was thrilling, fascinating. You've got, you know, Peter Jennings one time said, when you do this kind of work, you're in the front row seat of whatever's going on in life. And so, and I was a hard ass. I was not a sweet person. I mean, I'm still kind of, you know, not a warm fuzzy, but, at the time, I've remarried a man I used to work with there, but at the time we were working together, he just couldn't stand me because I was so tough, you know? And I think even though at that time I was sober and I had God in my life, I didn't have the vulnerability that it really takes to operate with spirit. And now I've come to believe mostly that vulnerability is its own defense. It's its own defense. It knows best. And so my time in news was glorious. I love it. I look back and I really miss aspects of it. But then there's another part of it that I am now glad to be gone from, because they tend to focus on the dramatic aspects of life and the worst of the worst thing that's happened. And so the thing I enjoyed was the investigations, because that actually changed things significantly, if you ask me.
Wow.
So.
Well,
Now,
thank you for the work that...
No, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say thank you for the work that you did, because you were moving big energy, and then you moved into the energy world. So to me, I see that as kind of like, you know, moving all of this foundational stuff and then coming into another space to add the spiritual aspect to it. So I just wanted to say thank you for going out into the trenches and doing those stories.
Thanks, Hillary. Well, thank you. Thank you guys for inviting me onto this platform to do the interview. I really appreciate it. It's perfect timing.
Wow.
And then I want to talk about reluctance. Hey, look, I have this really cool pen. Is that neat?
How do we get these glowing pens?
It's a chakra pen. No, I'm just kidding. I want to talk about reluctance, because I think I know a lot of people who are phenomenally talented mediums and psychics, who are much more talented actually than I am, who've been psychic their whole life. And it makes me ask, why do you need me, God? You know, but I think the reason is because I am truly a reluctant psychic. I did not come into it. I came into it kicking and screaming a bit, and I came into it afraid of what people would think of me. And I think that's my badge of courage, would you say, that I've spent the last 13 years making sense of it. And as I do that, I drag people with me. And I know from my recovery work that illness begins with I and wellness begins with we. And I know that if we do this together, it's a much safer, vibrant environment. And so my reluctance has led me to seek out others who are like-minded, and that has certainly made my journey much better and very funny too, like very funny. I laugh a lot now about this. So I really would say anybody who's watching this and having psychic experiences and not sure what to do about them, find a community. Find a local community on Meetup. Come visit us on psychichousewives.com. Find Hillary and James. Find people that are like-minded so that you don't feel like you're alone in all of this.
Wow. That's not a bad thing to be about anything, to be reluctant or resistant, because, otherwise you're just going to go around like jumping into all sorts of ideologies and philosophies or abilities or whatever. It's like I do that. I actually spoke about that 3 days ago, that, I have acceptance of a situation because I'm reluctant all the time, because I don't want to waste my time with something that's not pure or good. And I have a lot of ability to do a lot of things, and I have, a lot of interests and a lot of desires, and I don't want to just waste it on something that is half-hearted. I just want to.
Right.
So that's not a bad thing to do that, to be reluctant. I
No,
don't think
it's not.
But you need to know when to stop the reluctance, and the resistance is the key.
That's the road.
And accept
right.
it.
And accept it.
I think it's an important part of that. Yeah, I remember when I was first coming out into doing Reiki stuff and things along those lines, and the word psychic just terrified me, because I got this vision of 1-800-PSYCHIC and neon letters in my window and people going crazy.
Yeah.
But once I accepted the fact that this is what it is, end of story. It just assimilated into my being, and then it was no longer a big deal. And I think that goes back to your vulnerability stuff. It's like you feel vulnerable until you accept something. And there's always a fear related to something woven into that. Wouldn't you say, until you've accepted yourself as is, good, bad, and ugly, I say good, bad, and holy. It's all holy, everything.
Yeah.
We all have these intricate little nuances in our humanness that makes it interesting, to say the least. As long as we're not hurting people or doing things along that line, I think it's a rather interesting landscape. And when we find other people who are like-minded or, just there with us, it's fun to explore that and get to know someone else's landscape. And sometimes you find mountains and valleys, and that's just the way it is. And you have to be acceptance of the whole exploration thing. So I think being psychic is, I think we've moved beyond that. Don't you think? I don't know if there's so much of a stigma as, you're just a 1-800-PSYCHIC person, or, where's my Bluetooth, or where did I leave my keys kind of thing. Psychic to me goes into deeper realms within the person's energy system than it does just about, well, where am I going to work next? Where am I going to go do this? And do you find that most people who come to you for readings are looking to be told what to do or how to move in their lives versus think for themselves?
That's a great question, because everything we're talking about, even with the skepticism or the reluctance, comes back to having a certain kind of self-authority. And I think we divide up when we're talking about your customer or your client in the psychic world between people who really want to give away their self-authority to someone and someone who really wants an affirmation of an inner knowing that they have. And so I do not attract clients anymore who don't believe in psychic ability. I did at one time, and it was up to me to prove it. Or I felt it was up to me to prove that psychic ability is real. Gratefully, I attract clients at this point who are really in tune, even if they don't believe they're in tune, that they need to know more from spirit. My feeling about going, to storefront psychics, I don't want to generalize, but a lot of times if you've got a psychic phone bank or you've got a psychic on the street corner, you have to just be careful, because they're dealing with a needy clientele, and they're also dealing with, they've got a very good business sense that can overlap into being a shyster. And when you're talking about going and getting a psychic reading, people say, well, how do I find a good psychic? I say, ask someone. You'll be surprised how many of your friends actually go to psychics and get a referral. And so in my estimation for how things go now, I mean, I will not do a reading if I can't get, it's called evidential mediumship. It's called, you need to make sure as a psychic you're on it. So you need specifics. Like, I want specific names or facts. And if I'm not getting it in a reading, then I need to bow out because there's some interruption. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't, as psychics, get evidence in our readings that's very specific. But that being said, I now no longer get clients that say, what's going to be my next car? I get clients that are going to say, well, what's my next life goal? Or what's my, how can I be more loving? Those are some really interesting questions.
Wow.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I when I was on Achieve and I would do some reading shows myself, that was the question. I stopped doing them because the influx of questions were all about work, relationship. I mean, just generalized. Find me what I need to find, and people were giving their power away. And I refused to even entertain that anymore because they were just addicted to moving from one person to another to tell them what to do, how to live, how to breathe, how to act, who to love. Oh, is this person good for me or not? Well, what do you think? And when I would turn it around on them to ask them the questions, they were like, well, this isn't a psychic reading. You're supposed to tell me what's going on for me.
Right.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that's
how do you find... I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. That's exactly. I mean, radio readings can be a real problem for that. I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Just on the book, the Psychic Survival Manual. Tell us what you hope the reader to get out of it, Lorraine.
Well, Hillary. I hope they read Hillary's story because she's in there talking about her reluctance.
Wow.
Yeah, it's nice. It's a really great, poignant story. And somebody just sent me a really lovely message, and she said that she was looking at books, and she had finally found Echo Bodine's book, I think, Echoes of the Soul, and then she just read this book, and she said it kind of was so simple it made sense, so maybe it should be called Psychic Abilities for Dummies. And my book is so straight up about every category you can possibly think of when dead people see you, okay? So you're walking down the hallway and you go, oh my God, I think I just saw a dead person. I think a dead person is trying to make contact. How do you know that's real? What do you do if it is? It's very basic that way, and yet it's a more complex book because it talks about taking care of yourself energetically, doing your protection. And what I find is when people don't believe, when they refuse to believe, that's when they're not safe because they are really not well equipped to deal with dark energies or naughty ghosts. And then they're not equipped to receive the beautiful information you receive from angels or your deceased relatives who are trying to speak to you. So my hope is that it's laid out so plainly because it's not only my story. I've gathered stories from men and women who've had psychic experiences, what it looked like, what it felt like, what it tasted like, and then that person reading the book, I hope, will go relate to it enough to go, maybe I am psychic, and then be willing to take that as the acceptance stepping stone to equipping themselves and moving along in a more integrated fashion.
What's the
That's
word?
great. So what was your first experience like when you saw your first dead person? I'm curious. I don't think I've ever asked you that.
Well, it was really weird. It was weird. It was just like I knew it, and yet every 2 seconds I was like, this is not happening. This is not happening. And I was actually, because I was a reporter, I actually kind of took some notes, and that was when I was able to affirm with that doctor that this woman was real and giving me information. But I had another experience in the desert when I was with a reporter, and I was with another reporter who was psychic, and this person had not told me they were psychic. And this was before anything started happening to me. And the things I saw, it was in four corners in a house that was built into the ground. And the things that happened there, that was at the time when I was still in my reporter mode. So I was like, I can't believe all of this just happened. We'd see things at the exact same time, name them, feel them. And later I told a friend of mine, a very long-time friend, I'm like, I don't know what happened, but this was my experience. So I really couldn't say, oh, I had a psychic experience. I just qualified it as being really weird, including literally seeing these dark demons run across the wall, and then having a wall of gel come across me that was like the Holy Spirit, and then seeing, as God is my witness, because this reporter and I both saw it, sparkling fairy dust falling from the ceiling. And it fell across the whole house. It just fell. And I was like, what is that? And he's like, it's fairy dust. So I was like, ah!
So do you feel that the gel and the fairy dust was kind of like your angels coming in to protect you from the demonic energy that you had witnessed?
Yes. I feel like my mom showed up, and by the way, this reporter who I was with named my mom. Just said, oh, your mom is here with her name. But absolutely, I felt like the gel was definitely the purest energy I've ever had go through my body, and it was a wall of gel that came through. And then I did feel like the fairy dust was fairy dust. I felt like there were fairies present, and it just showed that fairies can be anywhere or do anything. And I've never forgotten it. Never. I can describe everything in the room to you because it was just mesmerizing from my vantage point.
So that changed your perspective then, right, on the reality of things, and it gave credibility to things that you had perhaps not really seen in real life but had read about. Yes? Do you think, would that be an accurate statement?
No, that's exactly right, Hillary, and that's kind of where we go with this. I think you don't believe anything unless you experience it. That's my opinion. And so that goes for psychic abilities. I don't ever argue with people if psychic abilities exist or not. I don't. I think a really good psychic can help you have an experience of psychic abilities, even if you're not having it for yourself. But I think once you have these experiences, that's the true validation that psychic is real. And you know, you're right. We can reduce everything to the word psychic, but when you get older and more mature, you realize, oh my gosh, you know, it's just a big matrix and everything's interconnected and we're all related. But the psychic word, like you said, not everybody wants to use it, but it's such a perfect definition for what it is, because it is this experience, and you can't really describe it any other way than having an interdimensional experience that isn't necessarily a physical apparition or something. It's more of a third eye seeing. And so, yeah, so that broke me open. And as we all know, we can have these seminal experiences that break us wide open. And I think people who have near-death experiences, that can be very seminal for them in terms of a rapid opening of psychic abilities.
Do you have any...
Sorry.
Now, do you have any group meetings or anything where you connect with other people who have abilities, or like a community?
Yeah. Yes, thanks for asking. We have a Psychic Housewives group on Facebook that has about 1,200 people in it.
Wow.
And that is kind of that's my mainstay of women, and we have admin, and then we have breakout groups which do oracle readings, and we have demon busters. We call it the energy protection group, but they're like demon busters people. And then we also have artists. And so, yes, and then we do local, we've done a lot of get-togethers. We've done get-togethers in Minneapolis, up by Mount Shasta, and here in Los Angeles. And then I also have a local meetup group in Los Angeles. And so, yeah.
Wow, awesome.
That's, to me, the legacy that I hope to create or continue is just the psychic housewives hold is a sacred energy that I feel like I'm the steward of. And that energy just burns so pure and true. And it's so authentic. And it really supports people, men and women, in empowering their authenticity to follow their intuition.
Mm. Why don't men get involved in this stuff? Why are men so alien to this whole concept?
I don't know if they are alien to the concept.
Every guy I know. Well, then I know a lot of engineers and scientists, so I know I'm a rare breed. But I'm an engineer and a scientist, by the way, Lorraine. But I'm not afraid to talk about a psychic. I have a father who's a hypnotist and a healer and an engineer, so I know I have a unique experience.
A hypnotist and an engineer and a healer. Wow.
Yeah. You know, he's a unique guy, but I mean, all guys I know, it's like, this is like a taboo subject. It's like, and I just think it's like women, it's not that they flock to it, I just think they don't have any problem with it. They just like, you know.
Well, James, I'm hoping you can answer that question.
I don't know. The male race.
Yeah, I think James should answer this question.
I think the males just puzzle me altogether. I don't get them at all. It's like, I really don't.
Yeah.
I think they're like aliens. I do. But
what are like aliens? What are you talking about? Are like aliens? What,
men. I think men are like a little alien species on this planet, like that aren't in touch with anything. I think they're very detached from the earth. But not all. I'm gonna lose half my. I know.
That's interesting. You say that.
Yeah.
That's
really very interesting. Yeah.
And yet,
so how do we fix that? How do we get the engineers and the scientists?
It's just like I look at the world, and it's like you have all these savant guys going around. I'm a specialist in this, I'm a specialist in that, and they're just, you know, they just not emotionally connected. They're not spiritually connected, you know. And it's like, you know, I'm speaking on the spectrum of the large scale. Obviously, there are people there, you know, there are people there that are, but It just, I don't know. It's I don't think it's society doing it either, and I don't think it's down to makeup. I just think, I don't know. I think it's a multitude of things. But
I think they're reluctant to add in the earth element because they're so logically aligned with fact and that part of the brain that works in that world. Because when you're dealing with being psychic, and Lorraine, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have to move into a different part of your brain that allows different connections to light up and coordinate things. So perhaps the reconnection really has to do with using different parts of your brain and then going out and developing a relationship with nature so that you can get that earth element back. I think we're missing the earth element for a lot of our, you know, architects in the world, those people who design things, put things together and do it. I think we need to reconnect to that earth element. What do you think, Lorraine?
Yes. You know, as you're saying that, I'm reminded of this Dr. Oz episode where they put a cap on the Long Island medium while she was doing readings. And the whole movement within her brain was so unusual. They analyzed what parts of her brain were working. And
wow.
If you get a chance, look up that episode because it was really it had never been done before, and the doctors were so excited about what they were seeing. But yes,
what was the name of that episode, Lorraine? What was that called?
Well, it's Dr. Oz Long Island Medium. So I don't know. Yes, she was on it, and it was fascinating. So I think that you're raising an excellent issue, James, when you're talking about they're aliens on Earth. Because, you know, the Druids, going back to that connection to the land, the Druids were so powerfully involved with the land. And even though we had the warrior societies and we've had the women in charge in Greece and the men.
And Ireland.
And Ireland.
Beautiful Ireland. And I remember a lot of when I was a reporter and I was covering a lot of indigenous people issues and Native Americans, especially up in Northern California. their land was being taken away. And one of the tribal elders said to me, our land is our soul, it's our spirit, and it's been replaced with alcohol, a lot of alcohol problems, as we know. And he called it liquid spirit. And I think that the men today, maybe they don't get to be in the wilderness and do the male thing. And I also think it's become politically incorrect to be a hardcore man, you know? And I really feel like, I think Richard Rohr talks about the tribal initiation that has virtually disappeared for young men, that men need to be men. Men think differently. Men don't think like women. Why would they think the same spiritually? They won't. But yet maybe they do have this innate need to really be powerful and in nature. And that's been, interestingly enough, taken away. Because I think going back, there was a sense of, before the church got involved, men having the innate sense of what was going on in their environment.
Well, it's bizarre you say that, and I covered that a little bit this last weekend with paganism in Ireland and Christianity converting the pagans, and the way of life was to understand natural cycles and astronomical cycles, moon, solar, stuff like that, and especially this part of the world, it got really converted from a patriarchal point of view, and it's like it just literally changed inside 300 years. It just, the hourglass got like that, you know. And but yeah, I mean, that was the way of life, to go into the land and be a man. But you know, that was always, even in a Celtic way, that was for protection as well. To be strong for protection, not to be strong to dominate or strong to control or strong.
Right. It was it was with the right intention. It was clearly the right intention. And now, I don't know where we're at with Ben. I feel bad. I mean, I'm raising two sons, and it seems like it's a bit confusing for them, you know, because they're very emotional. They're both very emotional boys. I mean, my senior in high school and my junior high boy, they're both very emotional, and they're lovely, lovely people. But I don't know how to advise them. I don't completely understand the world we live in at this point. I mean, what I do advise them to hook up with a higher power, and I do advise them that they have an angel team taking care of them, and do go into the woods, and we do things that are pretty guy things, and my husband's pretty good about that, but I think it's important for them. You know, we go out and shoot airsoft guns, and we ride dirt bikes.
Wow.
And after we do that, they are all the better for it.
Wow. Hillary, do you want to mention the Emmys?
Well, I just know you have 4 of them. And I don't know what you got them for specifically. I just know you have 4, and I'm proud of you for being so accomplished in your work and for being honored for that. And I think that gives credibility to you, because you were able to, I don't know, at a very high level, be able to do your work intuitively, to make it productive, to do these important stories, to reveal the truth. And I think that you and I connect on that level a lot, is that level of, telling the truth and doing the digging and doing the research and pulling it all forward. And we're good at that. I mean, I'm good at it. I know you're good at it.
You are good at it. Yeah.
When we put our heads together.
Well, you are. It's funny. You and I overlap. I know we overlap online with people who we connect with, because I just really enjoy your work. I enjoy your digging, the female David Icke over here. David Icke.
Wow.
You've always told me that, and I always laugh whenever you say that, because I do feel like that's when I get into that state of mind, and I have to. It's a space. I have to be in that space. Nothing stops me. I can just go and go and go and go and go until I find it, and then bring it out and show it. But yeah, I think David's work has been really important to the world. I've spoken on that before, but some of the places he goes with his work, I can't really get into, but I can appreciate for what he puts out. But I think the thing to mention with David's work, and people who do work like David, is that it breaks your psyche open. It gives you a different point of reference for reality, which is what happened to you at the Four Corners. And I happen to know that the Four Corners is a long talked about portal area. The Native Americans in that area have very specific prophecies and myths that go along with things that happen. Shiprock is very close by. I was just there, in fact, last month for the first time, sitting on the exact conjunction point of the Four Corners.
Wow.
So when you shared your story, I was saying, you know, that makes so much sense because the veil is very thin there. And I think on certain places on this planet, we have a very thin veil. And when we find those places, we can connect to other realities, other dimensions, interdimensional happenings. I also know that when people do see dead people or they see ghosts, especially for kids, it's a really complex situation because parents don't necessarily know how to handle that. They get afraid of it, so they create kind of like a shutdown mode where the kids, you know, they either make the kids afraid of it or they just kind of dismiss it, and that can cause a lot of interruption into the gifts that are naturally inherited in humans, I believe. I also believe that I think once we start to open ourselves up to them, they can see us better, and they can come to us, and they can share. I mean, since I helped my grandmother cross over, it was one of the most powerful experiences in my life, as you know, and that enabled some kind of bridge. I know when she's around, she can speak to me, I can speak to her, she can go off into the other world and find whatever I need and come back and give it to me. That's kind of like a spirit guide, but it's like a level higher than a spirit guide because it's an intimate, real relative of yours that you had this powerful experience. And when you think of death and you think of dead ones, people who've crossed over, it brings up all your issues with dying. It brings up all your issues with the fear of death. And we've been so ingrained with the fear of death that we do everything possible to keep it at bay or to not talk about it. And when I see people crossing their family members over, most of the time they're stuck and saturated in this fear, inability to resolve or to find an intimate space that I've actually been called. And I think this might be something I'm going to be manifesting in the future to help people better navigate that very, very moment of crossover for their loved ones because they're not taught how to do anything. They're not taught really how to be. And I think that the most important thing is love has to be present. Love, encouragement. You know, we're a bizarre culture. Ancients had a totally different way of dealing with this whole phenomena. So I see it as a complete revamp. We need like a complete revamp of how we deal with death, how we deal with the ones who have crossed over, the soul that crosses over. So your work is important for people to understand, read, and get into because it gives a starting point to really go into that. I don't have a question. I just was on a rant.
No, that's great. I
nice.
agree completely. And I just went to an event with Echo Bodine and Thomas John, who's a medium, who I found both of them to be phenomenal. She has a book out on what happens when we die and from a psychic's perspective. And he just gets dead people. Like, I would say he had a 99% hit rate of everyone in the room. Just phenomenal, including He did me. And he named my mom. He named my deceased ex-mother-in-law. He's phenomenal. And I used to think, well, what's the benefit? You know, what's the benefit to people if there's not a real message like, oh, your grandma's here and she thanks you that you're wearing her red shoes, you know? But the message that I found what was hopeful for people was that life goes on. Life goes on. And that's it. You know, that's what he was offering. Mm-hmm. And Echo was offering more of a context, which I really enjoyed. But I think you're right. I mean, I think we're so afraid of what's out there. And if it isn't real, if life doesn't go on, how scary is that? That's very scary. And if life does go on, that's scary too. So, you know, I mean, you got to navigate it. So I think you're right. I mean, that whole death and crossing over, I don't know. We just don't spend enough time thinking about that and honoring it.
I think it's
actually.
I think it's important what you said is because I'm less afraid of death now that I know and I've talked in shows, and not just because of shows. I I've explored some concepts in my late 20s and early 30s, but I definitely believe there's something out there just from what I've seen and what I've heard and what I've talked to people about. And I just don't think we die. I just think we just go on to another. It's just a physical realm we're in at the moment, and I just think we carry on somewhere else. And as a result, I'm less afraid of death. So I think that's what I take from it. You know, I'm less fearful, and I used to be. I mean, I used to be quite, oh my God, I'm going to die, make sure I can get everything done in my lifetime because it's like, this is it, like, you know.
Yeah.
But
One chance to get it right, James. James, have
One
you ever
chance.
seen a dead person?
maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I seen a guy dressed in what looked like 1920s clothing myself. My friend, who was a girl, we walked back 4 miles because we couldn't get a taxi from a party, and it was a country road. And the guy looked so bizarre. It was like 4 a.m. in the morning time. It was winter as well. It was cold. She had my jacket. I gave her my jacket to wear, and I was more preoccupied with being cold. And I seen some guy walking towards me, and I looked at. I said to her, "Can you see him?" I actually asked her that. She goes, she says, "I don't think he looks real." And I said, "Why not?" And I said, that was how the conversation started. I said, "Can you see him?" is what I said,
Yes.
and she said, "I don't think he's real." And I said, "He's not wearing the right clothes." I was like, that's how weird the conversation was. I actually wanted to bump into him to see was he real. And I actually tried to, and he stepped aside. He knew I was going to do it. I kid you not.
Interesting. So, Lorraine, what do you pick up on that? Anything?
I don't know.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's definitely a ghost sighting. If I've ever
Perhaps.
heard
I mean, I was pretty drunk, okay, but I wasn't that drunk because of the cold pretty much snapped me out of it.
No, that's
I-
that's an affirmation because you both saw it too, and you
Yeah.
both knew something was really
We
off.
always had a few little things together as well. She was a good friend of mine, and the thing was, I mean, I'd already walked for like 3 of the miles. Like, I mean, I was sober. I was pissed off because it was cold. I was pretty alert and awake. You know, I wasn't just. But then I said, well, you know, maybe I'm out of it here. I don't know. But I'm glad she's seen it. I mean, if that was on my own, I would have I would have committed.
But see, I think that's the gift of spirit when you have a witness, when you have somebody who can acknowledge it at the same time and place. That's powerful because you know something's off, and if it's just you, it's okay. If it's just you, it's okay. But when you have a cohort acknowledging it, that is spirit kind of giving you a little nudge, like this stuff's real, you know.
Wow. Well, guys, we're at the top of the hour. I'd love to talk to you again anyway, Lorraine, but for now we've got to wrap things up. Of course, you have an oracle deck as well, which looks awesome. So LorraineRoe.wordpress.com and psychichousewives.com as well, and you can catch out today's author, researcher, ex-journalist and psychic as well. I commend you on your journalism. I think it's great what you've done, and I just think it's prolific what you've done in that department, and you certainly have done your time in that genre. But it's nice to talk to you, Lorraine. It really is.
Oh, thanks. It was so great to talk with both of you. You're both beautiful. It's just a wonderful